Hi everyone, my name's Christine, and this is my 6th video in this series entitled Twin Flames and Entity Attachments. If you are new here, this is a good time to jump in. Let me do a brief recap of my previous 5 videos. This situation started happening to me in 2019, and at the time I was living in Sacramento, California. From November of 2018 until June of 2019, I worked really hard on a project that changed my life. I was also working 3 jobs as an occupational therapist. So between those 2 things, I was working 7 days a week. In July of 2019, I got a friend request on Facebook from someone I went to high school with. We started messaging. I really didn't think it was a big deal. I was planning on relocating back to Philadelphia, which is my hometown, because my father had dementia, and I had worked in healthcare for a long time, so I knew that he was really going to need some help. So when this person sent me a friend request on Facebook, I found it interesting. He's from the Philadelphia area. I thought, great, we can message and maybe we can meet up when I get back. Side note, I'm generally not attracted to men. The last time I was with a man was like a long time ago, so I wasn't really looking at this person as some type of potential romantic partner or anything like that, at least not initially. So we messaged for a few months, and it was actually a help to me because I was preparing for a cross-country move, and it was quite stressful, packing and getting ready to move from Sacramento to Philadelphia. So I really enjoyed messaging with this person as I packed up and finished up my 3 jobs and got ready to go. So at the end of August of 2019, I had a plan of stopping in 13 cities across the United States. I was very much looking forward to this. There were also some metaphysical aspects that happened before I left Sacramento, and if you're interested in the details of those metaphysical aspects or red flags, you can just go back to my previous video to get the backstory. When I was shooting in the Fairmount Park area a couple of days ago, there were a couple of important clips that didn't come out. In one of the clips, I gave this person a pseudonym, so I'm going to call him Mr. Catalyst, and I'll put the definition of catalyst on the screen in case you haven't heard of that word before. But when this person was reintroduced into my life in 2019, he truly did bring with him a huge amount of change for me. So for that reason, I'm going to call him Mr. Catalyst, or Mr. C for short. I realized a few important things after I finished filming outside in Fairmount Park, and so after the video, I'll jump back on to share my revelations. I'm going to discuss this trip in relation to this person, but I could also do a whole other video series about this cross-country trip and not even mention this person. So I don't want you to think that I was so focused on him that the entire trip was all about him, because it wasn't. And yet at the same time, this person was with me in spirit. I know that might sound kind of woo, but that's just the way I experienced it. In August of 2019, I was packed up, ready to go. I drove from Sacramento to Las Vegas in a day through the Mojave Desert, which was beautiful but hot, especially at the end of August. And I arrived in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, I have flown through Vegas a couple of times, but I had never spent any time there, and that's why I decided to stop in Las Vegas for a couple of days. So I decided to stay at this place called The D, which is located in the old section of town. It was not near the glitzy hotels such as the MGM Grand or anything like that. And I was fine with that. When I got to my room, even though I requested a non-smoking room. I could tell it was considered non-smoking, but oh my gosh, the smoke, it was going right through the ventilation system. So all this to say, it was an okay hotel, but it was kind of seedy. And since I had just driven 9 hours from Sacramento to Las Vegas, I didn't even care. I think I paid like $29 or something for the hotel room, $29 a night, because no one goes to Las Vegas, I guess, when it's 105 degrees out. So, and this was right before Labor Day weekend. So I just booked into the room, and for a day, I really didn't do much of anything. I was just so exhausted from packing up, finishing everything up. I just almost like stayed in the hotel room and didn't do anything. And then once I recovered a little bit, I decided to go out at night and explore a little bit. And one of the things I'll say about Las Vegas is when I was there, it was almost like someone had a hairdryer on my face constantly when I was outdoors. The hot air that would blast at you when you walked out the door was like nothing I had ever experienced before. Like, Sacramento is hot, but to me, Las Vegas just blasted me with heat. The last night, I decided to go out because I had not been out in about 8 months or so. And I had gotten a few recommendations from local people about where to go. And the first place I went, it wasn't happening. It was supposed to be kind of like a local underground party, and I went there searching for it. It was in a part of town that was just residential, and I found out through someone that was actually there and that knew about this party that it wasn't happening that night. So I was disappointed, but I was like, okay. And I tried one other place, and it was okay, but you know, I don't thrive on going out, but I just wanted to experience Vegas. Then I was walking back to the hotel room from the second place, and I look up like that, and I saw like people hanging off the balcony, and this Latino music just blasting, like really good Latino music in Spanish. And I love the music. I loved it. And I was just like, what is going on there? So I went up, and what do you know, it's Latin night, and people were just having fun. So when I'm standing on the balcony, just chilling and enjoying the night, Mr. Catalyst, the thoughts of Mr. Catalyst come into my head, and this feeling of longing for this guy comes over me. And I'm actually very surprised, because I had not had this feeling for anyone in at least 10 years. And the last time I had this type of feeling for a guy was easily 20 years ago. And I said to myself, I would have given all this up, meaning my night in Las Vegas, just to hang in that smoky, seedy hotel with him, just to get to know him. And when I say that, I don't mean sexually romping in the bed and all this and that. I just meant actually spending intimate time with a person. Just watching TV or hanging out and not really doing anything much, you know, like when you're with a person and you really like them and you don't have to do much or say much. It's just, it's nice to be around them. That's the feeling that I got that night when I thought of him. And I thought, wow, that's so amazing, because I haven't had that feeling in 20 years for a guy. And I just said, well, I'm really looking forward to seeing this person when I get back to Philly. So when I got back to the hotel room, what happened next is going to be hard to put into words. but I'm going to do my best. And in subsequent videos, I'm going to come back to what happened in Las Vegas, because when I went through it initially, I thought it was this really positive thing. And although there are some positive aspects to it, overall, what happened was I gave my consent to something that I didn't understand. So when I returned to my hotel room, it was about 2 a.m. And the next day, I had to repack the car and drive to Flagstaff. So I needed to get up pretty early. I woke up around 7. And there were a couple of messages from Mr. Catalyst, and we proceeded to message back and forth for a couple of hours off and on. The messages were not sexually explicit. It was more that I was getting close to this person emotionally. He told me some very important emotional things. He sent me some pictures that were very special to him, nothing to do with sex, nothing like that. And I really opened up to this person in that hotel room. And when I say opened up, I just mean I didn't realize it, but I opened up on all levels, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And I gave my consent to have this person, Mr. Catalyst, come into my energy field. And I know that sounds kind of woo, but it's the truth. And it will set the stage for what happens for the rest of this experience. I gave my consent, but I didn't know what I was giving my consent to. Regardless, I gave my consent. And I didn't give my consent verbally, it was through my actions. So at 9 a.m., I needed to get going. And when I tried to get up out of bed, I was so exhausted. I was more exhausted than I had been in a long time. I couldn't even take a couple of steps. All I wanted to do was to go back to bed and sleep the rest of the day. Like, the overwhelming need for sleep was... I've experienced the need for sleep before, but this was just like, I just want to crawl under the covers and stay here all day. That's all I can really do. But I said to myself, I can't do that. Like, I've got to get up. I've got to repack the car, which involved taking a lot of stuff from the hotel room to the car, because I did not want to leave a lot of stuff in the car because we're in Vegas and I didn't want it broken into. So, God really protected me there. I had, all my stuff, a lot of stuff in the car since I was driving cross country. So I had several suitcases. I probably needed to take about 6 trips from the hotel room through the 100-degree heat to my car, which was in the parking garage. Even though that seemed like such a small feat, it was a huge task. It was like moving a huge boulder up the mountain by myself. I kid you not. I could barely move, but I forced myself to get up. And there's one thing that happened that I remember distinctly that I feel like I need to relay, because when this whole thing happened to me, there were, I'm gonna say, positive spirits and dark energy running through this entire story. It was not one or the other. And so when I went to get up and I could barely take 2 steps, I heard and I felt distinctly, and they just said, "Christine, you need to stop drinking alcohol." And I just said, okay. And at the time, I thought that my vibrations were going up and up and up and up. Like, I could feel something happening. And what they told me was, look, this would be a lot easier on you if you were not drinking alcohol. And so the reason at the time that I thought I was so exhausted was that I had been out partying until 2 a.m. I got 5 hours of sleep, and then I messaged for a couple of hours with this person, and I was just exhausted. Like, I'm a person that needs my sleep. And yes, that was part of it, but like I said, in subsequent videos, I want to go over the Las Vegas situation again. But I just want to tell it how I experienced it first. So when they told me, look, you got to stop drinking alcohol because you're just making it harder on yourself, I was like, okay. I'm just embarrassed to admit that I still drink alcohol to this day. And I will say, I think when you're going through some type of intense spiritual experience, that alcohol is probably not a great drug to drink on a regular basis. It's just my experience, and to each their own, because I still drink it. When it was strongly recommended, and it was not the first time that this had been recommended to me to stop drinking alcohol, I did really take notice. And I kept trying to put one foot in front of the other, but something spiritual was happening, and I could literally feel something happening to me internally, and I was extremely drained by it, but it was also extremely pleasurable at the same time. And I said, okay, well, whatever's happening, I still need to pack, and I still need to drive to Flagstaff, Arizona. And so, as difficult as it was, I put one foot in front of the other, and I hauled those suitcases out to my car. So I loaded up the car, and I got something to eat, and I did the 4-hour drive from Las Vegas to Flagstaff. Little did I know, I had given my consent on a physical, emotional, and spiritual level to something that I really wanted, meaning I did really want to at least meet up with Mr. Catalyst, but I did not understand the full picture. The idea of consent is very important, and sometimes you consent to things and you think you know what you're consenting to, but you don't know the whole picture. And that is exactly what happened to me. It broke me open in ways going forward where I felt I was operating in two different realities at the same time. And I still feel that way today. But when it first happened, it was incredibly hard to take. And now I'm more used to it. It's almost like this parallel reality that's all around me, and occasionally I'll get glimpses. At the time, this person, Mr. Catalyst, even though he wasn't with me physically, he was in this other reality. So it was almost like his spirit was all around me, just not visible. And I thought that was a great thing because I had no basis for comparison. And since I had been used to being drained all my life, I also thought it was just a result of the spiritual experience that I was so tired, and that I literally had to push myself to even walk, let alone load up my car with my suitcases and do the 4-hour drive to Flagstaff. But once I got myself going, I was okay. It was almost like a wave that I had to ride, and then I was able to recuperate a little bit and just relax a little bit on the drive to Flagstaff. it was such a cool experience that I had nothing really to compare it to. And it was completely amping up my desire to meet with this person. Although I was acutely aware that we were getting to know each other well in the metaverse, so to speak, but we really didn't know each other well in everyday life. And if there's one thing that I would say is be careful when that disparity starts to happen, where if you're communicating with someone and you know them well and you're exchanging emotional and intimate details of your life, but you wouldn't do that face to face because you don't know them well enough, then really take notice of that. One thing I didn't realize until recently is that the combination of the synchronicities that I have mentioned, that Mr. Catalyst inherently understood occupational therapy, he understood bisexuality, he sent me a friend request when I was relocating back to Philadelphia, and he didn't even know I was relocating back to Philadelphia where he lives. And also the timing of the friend request was very interesting because it gave us a few months to message, to get to know each other before I returned. So that, in combination with these metaphysical aspects that I have mentioned in my previous videos, and I'll continue to mention during this cross-country trip, those two things really served as a love bombing phase for me. And I know love bombing is discussed a lot online, like, oh, you like that movie? I like that movie. Oh, for example, you like hot yoga? I would love to try hot yoga. There were small things like that in our messaging where I know he was trying to almost make it seem like we had things in common, but that wouldn't have been enough to shake me the way that this situation ultimately did. What did shake me, though, was this combination of synchronicities where you couldn't make it up. This was not like 444 or 1111. No shade to people who believe in those numbers and that they actually mean something, because sometimes they can. Once again, synchronicities is something that I'm going to come back to in subsequent videos because there's a lot to that. But he really had no control over these hardcore synchronicities and these metaphysical things that I experienced that I believe he did not. He might have experienced a couple of things that were odd or unusual, but my guess is he probably just put it out of his head. Whereas these experiences that I went through in these different realms, there was no way I could simply put it out of my head because it had simply never happened before. And I thought, wow, this must be really special. I was always taught that when something like this, something special like this happens in these different realms, that it must be very important. It must be positive. It must be meant to be. And the tricky thing is, sometimes that can be the case and other times not. And I'll get into that more as we go along.